The main trouble that owners of old Volkswagen trucks face is the high cost of repairing them at a branded service. Prices for some operations, at the Mercedes level. This is partly offset by the survivability of the machine's units. Partly by the fact that even a serious repair of a simple T3 design is within the power of garage craftsmen. The motorist, who talked a lot with Zaporizets, finds familiar design solutions at the transporter. Certain comparisons suggest themselves. There is nothing to be surprised. The pedigree of both cars goes back to the design once developed by Ferdinand Porsche. The hood of the T3 is located at the rear of the cargo hold. Access to the engine is practically not difficult. An umbrella in the form of a raised end door will help to carry out repairs and maintenance in the rain. In a van and some passenger and freight modifications, you can get into the engine while inside the car. The T3 series was equipped with 4-cylinder engines of 3 families, which were fundamentally different from each other. The first is air-cooled gasoline boxer engines, which are directly descended from the Zook engine. The carburetor, air vent, with a volume of 1.6 liters developed only 50 horsepower. For a truck, this, of course, is not serious. However, for stingy Europeans, accustomed to saving every pfennig of taxes, they even released a deformed modification, the unfortunate 36 horsepower, less than the MZ 968. Relatively acceptable power of 70 horsepower developed only a 2-liter modification. She had a fuel injection option, the power of which remained the same as that of the engine with the carburetor. The second family is water-cooled gasoline engines. They retain the boxer layout, and even some nodes that are interchangeable with air vents. Such motors are noticeably more modern and reliable than their air counterparts. The displacement of carburetor modifications was 1.9 liters. The power of the basic version is also small, 60 horsepower. Of course, there was a derated modification of 54 horsepower. Only a motor boosted to 78 horsepower can be considered acceptable in terms of power. The fuel injection system added strength to the 1.9-liter opposite. The power of injection versions is 81 or 90 horsepower. But really serious 112 horsepower produced only a 2.1-liter injection engine. Opposite with a volume of 2.1 liters was tried to be equipped with a microprocessor ignition system, a catalytic converter and a lambda probe. One of the later modifications was brought into line with more stringent requirements for noise reduction. This reduced power to 92 to 95 horsepower. To avoid the valve adjustment procedure, which was difficult for the Zook, all boxer motors used on the T3 were equipped with hydraulic gap compensators. It is possible to disassemble and assemble these devices, for example, to clean them, but in the event of a breakdown, they cannot be repaired, and it is recommended to replace them as a set. The third family of engines no longer had anything in common with the first two. These are modern, even by today's standards, inline diesel engines with an overhead camshaft, taken from passenger Golfs and trade winds of the 80s. Liquid cooling is already implied here. In the low and wide engine compartment, designed for the opposite, the diesel engine had to be installed, tilted almost to a horizontal position. The cylinder block is turned towards the left side of the machine. The 1.6-liter modification developed 49 horsepower, and the 1.7-liter modification developed 57 horsepower. A 1.6-liter 70 horsepower turbocharged diesel was also produced. Its low power is fully compensated by high torque. In addition, a diesel engine is noticeably more economical than an opposite. It is worth recalling that a turbocharged diesel engine has one operational feature: it cannot be turned off at high speeds. Before turning off the ignition, be sure to let the engine idle for at least a minute. When the engine stops at high speeds, the compressor turbine continues to rotate by inertia, and oil is no longer supplied to its bearings. This is a surefire way to kill bearings. During idling, the turbine speed is reduced enough to stop safely. There was a rare modification with the fourth type of engine, a 6-cylinder, 90 horsepower, taken from a larger car of the LT family. It is the 6, as well as the 2.1-liter engine, that allows you to most fully realize the T2's load capacity reserves and improved dynamics. In addition, on a heavy machine, these motors operate with a lower load than low-power ones, so they have a longer resource. The attachment points of the power unit to the body are similar for all modifications. In this regard, the car can be converted. Instead of a gasoline engine, install a diesel engine, and vice versa. For example, according to some repairmen, it makes no sense to restore a failed air-cooled engine. it is better to immediately replace it with the diesel. Perhaps it makes sense to do the same with the opposite of liquid cooling that has become unusable. Repairing a boxer motor is not easy. Carter consists of two halves. When assembling, when you connect them, you must simultaneously control 17 points. In addition, half of the crankcase is planted not on a gasket, but on a special branded sealant that should not get into the engine. A certain difficulty is the correct installation of cylinder heads with pipes inside which the valve pusher rods pass. It is not surprising that most often the services categorically refuse to repair opposites. Another thing is diesel. According to the mechanics, its repair as a whole is no more difficult than the bulkhead of the VAZ engine. Only working with diesel equipment requires special skills, and today there are a lot of specialists in these systems, armed with diagnostic and repair tools. In addition, there are many diesel Volkswagens in the country, and the features of their repair are well studied. If you need to replace the clutch, repair only the engine or only the box. The T2 does not have to remove the entire power unit. The engine can be removed separately, and the gearbox separately, by placing a prop under the crankcase of the unit that remains on the machine. Access to the mounting of the power unit is not difficult. The water-cooled engine radiator was installed not in the rear, but in the front of the car behind the front bumper. This improved both the oncoming air scavenging and the weight distribution of the car. But at the same time, the pipes of the cooling system had to be laid through almost the entire body. The channels themselves and their connections, according to the owners, are quite tight. Landslide leaks are not observed even in very old cars. But filling the system with liquid becomes a difficult operation, especially since the expansion tank is located below the level of the radiator. With this layout, when you fill in liquid, air pockets almost inevitably form. The engine is running, the expansion tank is already full, but you don't see that in fact there is still catastrophically little liquid in the system, and the engine is about to start overheating. According to experienced repairmen, pouring coolant into the rear engine transporter and expelling all air bubbles is a whole science. True, if you only need to remove the radiator, it is possible to pinch the hoses, then part of the antifreeze will remain in the block. In the same way, the channels can be blocked when dismantling the heater radiator. And if the hoses are pinched when you remove the engine, the antifreeze will remain in the radiator. The question is reasonable. Is it possible to fill the cooling system of Volkswagen engines of the 80s with domestic, Tosol, and not branded antifreeze? According to the repairman, it is possible only if you are sure that Tosol complies with GOST and is not a fake. The left antifreeze can cause corrosion of the aluminum cylinder block, and, according to our experts, the Volkswagen Boxer engine is more likely to have such an incident than the Moskvich with the UFA engine. The brand of aluminum alloy from which the block is made plays a role here. Just in case, we were advised not to spare money on branded liquid. Rear-wheel drive cars of the T2 family were equipped with three types of gearboxes: 4-speed, model 091 or 091/1, 5-speed, 094, and automatic, 095. The boxes have been upgraded, and not all parts of the new options are interchangeable with the old ones. However, on a car of a long-standing release, the box assembly could be replaced with a newer one. You can determine the model of the box on your car by marking on the crankcase. How to find and decrypt it? Read the instruction manual. The Synchro used the fourth type of box, mechanical, 5-speed, which differed from 094 by the presence of a reduction gear and a power takeoff shaft to the front axle. When the rear wheel slipped, the front drive was connected by a viscous coupling, combined into one unit with the front axle gearbox. A rear-engine car inevitably has a remote gear shift drive, a rocker located under the lever, and a long shaft. Articulation adjustment is not difficult, but the drive contains plastic bushings and crackers, which wear out over time, which is why the gears begin to disappear. Machines with the same box model, produced in different years, have different switching mechanisms, the parts of which are not interchangeable. True, plastic lives for a long time, and not all owners of such machines have encountered the need to repair this unit. In the design of the rear suspension and the shape of its levers, there is a noticeable resemblance to the ZAZ 968. Only the springs are not cylindrical, but with a variable coil diameter, and they are located separately from the shock absorbers. In addition, CV joints are installed in the drives of the drive wheels, and not cardan joints. The CV joint, of course, does not forgive torn rubber anthers. Rear wheel bearings don't last forever. Riding with a buzzing bearing is risky. If it is destroyed, you can lose the wheel along with the hub. Most often, due to the noise of the engine, the driver does not hear in time extraneous sounds that have appeared in the bearing. Sometimes it is possible to identify the noise by ear with the participation of an assistant. The driver starts forward and backward, and his assistant stands near the car and listens to extraneous sounds. You can hang the wheel and try to feel the play of the bearing. But in both cases, the diagnosis should be carried out by an experienced person. An independent front suspension is arranged as usual for our motorists: a cross beam, upper and lower arms, coil springs, struts with steering knuckles. And, of course, the upper and lower ball joints that periodically need to be replaced. Steering from the lower rack located in front of the axle will also require timely replacement of the rod ends. These operations are simpler for the T2 than for the Ziguli. The fact is that the branded parts of VW cars have an excellent factory coating of fasteners and threaded parts. Nothing sticks to each other. After the usual cleaning of dirt, everything turns away easily, and the edges of the bolts and nuts do not break. Replacing the pads in either the front disc or rear drum brakes is not difficult. Most likely, an old German minibus will require some repair costs from the new owner. But many of those with whom we talked agreed that it is better to restore and operate this foreign car than to suffer with the old, killed Gazelle for the same money.